Happy to take any questions from members of the media. Yep, Shia.
This is very exciting.
Good morning.
There's so much going on. Good morning.
There is.
What about that thing that hangs over the city and the state right now? So many migrants coming into town, and it's likely to increase as Governor Abbott, wants to maybe punish Democrats here in the state for having the convention here. Is there going to be a more organized effort to kind of combat everything that's going on?
Well, let's remind everybody that it is the choice, the inhumane choice of the governor of Texas and his colleagues in Texas to send thousands of people across the nation and specifically to Chicago, many of them with sandals on their feet, with no coat when they arrive, who haven't been given a meal in quite some time, and they arrive here in need. Now, nobody thinks this is a good idea, especially in December, January, and February in Chicago, to take them out of an environment in which the weather is much warmer and put them in a freezing cold environment, especially as we saw the weather yesterday. So let's just all recognize that this is being foisted upon the city of Chicago. Nobody's asked for this. This is something that the governor of Texas is doing to other cities across the nation. We are working together, the city of Chicago, the other cities across the region here, and the state of Illinois to try to manage through this humanitarian crisis, creating new shelters and shelter beds. In fact, there's one opening today, making sure that we're providing food and clothing for people who come here without it, and then work authorizations to the extent we can provide that and work those folks through the system so they can get jobs. We have jobs available in Illinois. We have companies that have stepped forward and said, we would like those people to come work with us. And so our work is not done. We certainly have more to do. This is not something that we're being warned about as people arrive every day. We don't know how many are coming. We don't know how many buses will arrive. We don't know where they'll arrive. And again, this is a cheap political stunt perpetrated by a governor in Texas who is simply trying to score points for himself and his party. And one other thing, it's his party in Congress that is unwilling to come to the table to actually reach an agreement on comprehensive immigration reform and border security. And the president is at the table and Democrats are at the table. It's the Republicans who seem to be walking away. I hope that they will not. There is a chance over the next week that his party, the Republican governor of Texas' party, will do the right thing. But unfortunately, I'm pessimistic, haven't seen them do it as of yet, and think that this will be a good political maneuver in a presidential election year. It won't. People care about people. And the humanitarian crisis that the Texas governor and Republicans are causing is one that we intend to address.
Governor, it's been a week since your administration announced the intake centers will be located at the city's landing zone, along with some more heated tents for people. But people are sleeping in the conditions you were just talking about on buses without running water. How much longer is it going to take to get more adequate shelter set up at that?
Well, again, we work every day with the city of Chicago as they identify locations that we can set up shelters. As I say, one shelter is opening just today, and we're moving more than 200 people, families, and others into it.
Is that the CBS shelter?
It is in Little Village. That's correct. And I actually visited yesterday. It's phenomenal what we've been able to do in a relatively short period of time and to accommodate very young children. Early childhood education is very important to me, making sure these young children have a place that they can play even in a very difficult situation. That's been put into this site. It's well managed, and I think that I feel good about the opportunity there. And again, we're continuing to try to identify, working with the Cardinal and the Catholic Church to make sure that if there are locations that we could take over, and we've put funding forward at the state level to do exactly that. Progress is being made.
The city has sued some of the bus operators that are bringing in migrants.
That's right.
Is there anything that can be done with the plane operators, and is that something that you've requested from the feds? Any sort of help in trying to stop the planes from bringing migrants to Chicago?
We haven't seen any in the last few days, have you? And let's just say everything that we can do, we intend to do and are in the midst of doing.
What can be done though?
Oh, there's a lot. I mean, and again, I don't want to give away our strategies. You know, we're trying to prevent those companies from leasing their planes to the state of Texas. You know, you can't, in general, you can't tell a group of people or an aircraft that it can't come somewhere. On the other hand, there are lots of things that I think would be a significant deterrent, and they already are working.
Governor, there are a number of pain points associated with this endeavor, and obviously one of those is the financial portion of this. The
Yes.
city just re-upped a $30 million contract with the staffing company, but it's being funded through a state grant. Can you talk about, from the state level, what are your efforts to get more dollars from the feds, and have they hurt your cause?
Well, I think you've heard me over and over again express that the federal government needs to step up. In fact, there is a portion of the bill that's being debated in Congress right now over border security and then funding for Ukraine and others that would provide some resources to cities that are inundated now, again, by the governor of Texas, who's taken it upon himself to do this. We haven't seen those dollars yet, not nearly what we should. The federal government needs to do much more. I've said that publicly. I've put a letter, out there with specific ideas that I think they should undertake. Some of those they've done, others they have not. And again, I'm on the phone very regularly, and my administration is with the White House to try to encourage. But remember, Congress has to act. And we have at least one House of Congress that isn't under Democrats' control. And they seem to be absolutely opposed to making progress on this issue. So I'm concerned.
So short of that, are the state and the city just left to put the bill until then?
Yes, and philanthropy. Yeah, I mean, we're doing the best we can with the resources we have.
On a related note, lawmakers return to Springfield next week. Is a supplemental appropriation to deal with the migrant crisis part of your agenda for the spring, and what else?
Or when does that have to go? Does that have to go right away, or is there time?
It does not need to happen right away, but suffice to say, I've brought this up to leaders. They haven't wanted to bring it up yet. I do think it's going to be important for to deal with the costs here that are rising all the time, or at least the toll is rising, and we're all working together to try to meet the demand.
Is there a dollar figure you're looking at?
I'm sorry, say it
Is there
again.
a dollar target figure?
Well, $160 million is the amount that we've put forward. Yeah, we want to make sure we're filling all the buckets that we've drawn from in order to make sure we're dealing with the crisis at hand.
So two questions. First of all,
Yeah.
is there going to be beyond that backfill then? Just making sure it's just 160 million, not just, but 160 million and not any additional going forward. And then on another topic, can you please also, happy 2024,
Thank you.
address the gun registration? Now that that is in effect, we don't know how many so-called assault weapons are in Illinois, but it seems as if there are a lot of gun owners very publicly saying, we're not taking part in this. What are you encouraging, if anything, from the state prosecutors to do about that? And do you have any thoughts in terms of compliance or enforcement for folks who maybe missed the deadline, but then do register their guns that it's past January 1?
Let's see. There's a lot in that question. Let me start with calling out the misinformation coming from the other side. 2.4 million FOID card holders does not define the denominator. Not everybody has an assault weapon, and as you saw from the folks who have registered, many people have multiple assault weapons of their own. So each FOID card holder that has registered has had multiple. So my point is that many people already have registered, and we don't know the number of people that have those assault weapons in hand. What we know is that it's going to be vastly fewer than 2.4 million FOID card holders, and I think you've acknowledged and said that yourself. And so we certainly are trying to make it, as easy as possible for people to do that. There are people who missed the deadline who will have the opportunity and still do. ISP has said that registration is open to people even now. We have rules in place. There'll be rules that'll be codified, I suppose, once JCAR gets together over the next month, well, a couple weeks and month after that as well. But I also want to make something very clear. Don't fall for the shiny object that they're trying to get you to pay attention to about registrations. It is illegal and impossible to purchase an assault weapon at a store in the state of Illinois today because of the legislation that we passed. High-capacity magazines are unavailable. Assault weapons are unavailable to be purchased in the state of Illinois as a result of the legislation that we passed. And we'll work through the registration challenges over the next month or two. Yeah.
When I spoke with an organization that's helping the city with the migrants yesterday, they said that there's now quite a few migrants coming from other cities, not just being sent from. So are we shooting ourselves in the foot by continuing to provide resources? Kind of like if they build it, they'll come? I mean,
every city that's receiving them is providing resources. So it's not that we're doing something that.
specifically said a lot of these migrants are coming specifically to
Sure,
Chicago
yeah.
because they have more resources than New York and Denver.
Look, we're providing the absolute basics. No one is living high on the hog, arriving here on a bus, from Venezuela or from another city by way of, starting in Venezuela or other states, countries. They're arriving here and they're getting a meal. They're getting a shelter that is not, we're providing meals every day, but they're getting provided with food and they're getting provided with the basics. If you've been inside a shelter, this is not living high. And we're doing the basic things just to keep people alive and safe. So there's not, a bunch of, excess spending that's going on in order to provide them with, the best possible accommodations. So if you're suggesting that what we ought to do is reject people from the city of Chicago when they arrive, I think that's absolutely inhumane and wrong. And especially when they have no other place to go. We need to act. That's why we're doing it. If we thought there was some other way to manage this, believe me, the budgets would tell you that, we'd prefer to do that. But whoever's telling you this is misinformed, in my opinion. We certainly know that there are, do you know how many people have gone to New York City and stayed in New York City? Yes, we've received a couple of thousand people who've come from New York to Chicago, but think about literally over 100,000 people that have arrived in New York City that aren't coming to Chicago, and they're, dispersing or staying in the city of New York. We've seen tens of thousands of people arriving in other cities as well. This is not unique to Chicago. I don't think we're attracting people from other cities that, because of the benefits that we're providing. The truth of the matter is that we are doing what we think is the right thing to do to keep people safe and alive, and especially during the very harsh winter that we think can come in the city of Chicago and the cold weather that we know is here. Yeah.
The road buses is kind of became a whack-a-mole. They're all over the place. Municipalities have passed ordinances and then they just get dropped off elsewhere. Is there any plan to regulate the road buses on a state level?
So as you know, the laws don't exist in the state of Illinois for us to do that today, right? We can't just impose some rules from the state level on every city, every county, every township. There are certain towns and cities that have the ability to do that and certain that don't. And so, we've been listening to the various mayors and other leaders of those local governments to find out what it is they'd like the state to do. And certainly as the legislature comes back into session over the next week, they're going to be considering, whatever the options are.
Thanks, everybody.